He met up with acquaintance 2 at a Maverick gas station in Draper and purchased from him 15 to 30 round green-blue pills, which she understood to be fentanyl.
1 or 2 pills might be accidental. 20 or 5 times the lethal dose is not accidental, Your Honor. That is someone who wants Eric dead.
All eyes on Utah this morning as the Kouri Richins murder trial begins. The children's book author accused of poisoning her husband. What can we expect from day one? Plus, it's been 23 days and still no sign of missing Nancy Guthrie. The 84-year-old vanished from her home this morning. An update on where the search stands. And the mother of the accused Appalachia High School shooter set to take the stand today in her husband's trial. How will her testimony impact the state's case? Plus, the key moments from the murder trial of Dale Warner. His employees take the stand. That's all next right here on Opening Statements. Happy Monday to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host for this hour, Matt Johnson, in today for Julie Grant. Thanks for being with us. Just like an actual trial, we are getting your day started and the day ahead with what's going to happen in court. It's time now for your daily docket.
At some point during that conversation, does he ask you a question that disturbs you?
Yes.
And what was that question?
If I do something terrible, would you still love me? I think that's the way it was worded.
Okay.
In Georgia, testimony resumes in the trial against Kouri Gray. Court gets underway at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we'll take you there live once that begins. In California, Nick Reiner expected to be arraigned this morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. He's accused of murdering his 2 parents, Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle. And in Utah, the murder trial for Kouri Richins set to begin this morning. Opening statements expected at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And that's where we begin this hour. The children's book author is accused of killing her husband, Eric. Kouri Richins has been the center of a national attention since her arrest in 2023. Prosecutors say that she poisoned him with fentanyl, but her defense claims she's completely innocent. Court TV's Ted Rowlands has more on the case.
No matter if it's a parent, a sibling, or a friend, talking about loss with kids can be a tricky subject. Joining us now is author of Are You With Me?, Kouri Richins.
A year after her husband Eric died, Kouri Richins began promoting her children's book, which counseled kids on how to deal with grief. In an interview with ABC4, she explained what inspired her to write the book.
My husband passed away unexpectedly last year. It completely took us all by shock.
2 months after this television appearance, Richins would be charged in connection to fatally poisoning her husband, Eric.
She stated that the last time that she saw Eric alive was between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m. She stated that before going to bed, they had had a drink together to celebrate closing on a house for her business. And one of the children had a nightmare, and that the defendant got out of bed and went to be with that child in their bedroom. Around 3 a.m. when she woke, she stated she returned to her own bedroom, got into bed, and felt that Eric was cold to the touch. Based on the interviews that we conducted with those who knew Eric well, all stated that he did not use illicit drugs other than consuming THC gummies on occasion.
They knew that he didn't die of a drug overdose that he had caused himself. They knew that he was suspicious of Kouri.
According to court documents, prosecutors believe that Kouri Richins began plotting Eric's murder back in January of 2022 when she attempted to change his life insurance policy.
He knew that something was going on. He alerted his family, and he said, I think she's trying to kill me. And he even went so far as to say, if something happens to me, if something horrible happens to me, I want you to have Kouri investigated.
Kouri is desperate, greedy, and extremely manipulative. We have watched as Kouri has paraded around portraying herself as being widow and victim while trying to profit from the death of my brother.
She loved Eric. She loved her family more than anything. And anyone that actually knows her knows that she's just incapable of doing that.
I just wanted some story to read to my kids, and it's just comforting to them to know that, you know, they're not living this life alone. Like, Dad is still here, it's just in a different way.
Ooh, this case is messy. Did this children's book author write her own ticket to prison? We'll find out. Here to discuss, attorney and former prosecutor Tommy Pope and criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci. All right, let's do a round robin. Tommy, you first. What can we expect today?
I think they're going to come out with guns blazing. I think the interesting thing for me, I remember we had a bank robbery here around Charlotte, North Carolina, and all the folks lived in trailers before the bank robbery and bought mansions and boats and everything after. It seems like if you're going to off your husband, you at least fly under the radar and not go write a book about it. So I think you're going to hear it strongly. The meth, at least what you presented thus far, I think is a pretty strong case that the defense is going to have an uphill battle with.
Yeah, not only writing that children's book in question, but also maybe forging her husband's name and buying a big mansion, Mario?
Well, you know, I disagree a little bit with Tommy on this one because, you know, as a former prosecutor, we always loved somebody who was in the conspiracy to flip. But as a defense attorney, you know, this is the number one thing we can go against is the credibility of the woman that supposedly gave her the fentanyl. You know, we have the drug dealer who flipped and said he never gave fentanyl, he just gave OxyContin. And the deal that they made with this woman is unbelievable. I mean, she's getting full immunity. She's walking away from this. When they did a search warrant on her home, they found drugs there. So I think it's going to be very interesting. They still have not yet put the fentanyl in her hands. And that's going to be an uphill battle for them to prove. And I think she's going to testify. I really believe you're going to hear from her.
Oh, we love it when a defendant takes the stand here on Court TV. You know, another thing that might get brought up, and even maybe in opening statements this morning, Kouri is accused of witness tampering and wrote a letter in jail that was the walk the dog letter. Here's part of it.
She wants to link Eric getting the drugs and pills from Mexico, so we need some kind of connection. Her private investigator is doing some research on the ranch cartel place Eric would stay at. Here's what I'm thinking, but you have to talk to Ronnie. He would probably have to testify to this, but it's super short, not a lot to it. He will need to talk to Sky at the meeting next week. Upon information and belief, just like they say, a year prior to Eric's death, Ronnie was over watching football one Sunday, and Eric and Ronnie were chatting about Eric's Mexico trips. Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico, from the workers on the ranch. But not to tell me, because I would get mad, because I always said he just gets high every night and won't help take care of kids.
I mean, accused criminals are usually brilliant, right? But we have this accused children's book author accused of killing her husband, then authoring this in jail, Mario.
So, you know, we get this all the time. You know, your clients are on the phone all the time, and no matter what you tell them, don't talk about the case. Talk about, you know, laundry. Talk about the weather. Talk about what's going on in your life. Yet, you know, they still don't listen to you. So here's another case of, you know, this isn't a phone call, but this is a letter. So, you know, they've done everything they can to try to keep that out, but it's obviously coming in. So once again, she's gonna have to explain this if she testifies. That in the book, she's gonna have to explain when she testifies, and I think you're gonna hear from her.
You know, Tommy, it just seems like these letters come up more and more often in these trials here on Court TV. I mean, we had the case out of Florida, the matriarch murder trial. There were letters there. There was the one with the au pair, and she was confessing her love until she wasn't. Your thoughts on this?
I think if people have a little more sense, we'd never catch anybody. You know, they can't help themselves. Like Mario said, I remember jail calls we'd listen to, and the guy is talking about what he did to his mother, and the jail call has a recording at the beginning that says this is being recorded. And so it would be interesting, the person she's referring to testifying, obviously believing law enforcement's followed up with them. It'd be interesting, one, if they come to court, two, if they do, they could be crossed on that. I think it's almost worse than having no alibi or having no part like that at all, to have somebody say, no, he never said that to me.
Okay, Tommy, to you first, what do you think we need to hear in opening statements for this Utah jury? You play the part of the prosecutor.
Okay, the prosecutor, I always say that prosecutors make a mistake sometimes. You want to have enthusiasm about it, but it's a preview of coming attractions. I always like to lay things out, but rather than necessarily tell them the full details, using, for example, that witness, I'd say you'll hear about a letter and you'll hear about our plan to contrive this, and you're going to hear from the guy that she supposedly says tells this. But I wouldn't necessarily tell them what they said, because I think you lose the jury sometimes if you don't leave a page for them to turn, to steal the book example, something for them to fall into with you. It keeps their attention.
Mario, you have the task. Give me some reasonable doubt here. Go.
You got to put the fentanyl in her hands. You're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear that, there's a cooperation agreement from a co-conspirator who they found drugs in their house. You're going to hear evidence that she purchased drugs. You're going to hear evidence that they found the drugs in her home. And yet she comes in here, she gets full immunity. She gets to say whatever she wants. But you never hear her say when she gave her the drugs, there's no drugs in my client's hand at any time. She's nothing more than a loving wife.
Gentlemen, great arguments there. We'll see if they do just as well in Utah. You're sticking with us all hour long. Coming up next on Opening Statements.
I firmly believe someone out there knows something. Someone out there saw something, heard something. We need that person to call us.
Has there been any evidence so far that Nancy is still alive, or is it just hope of investigators and the family?
There's been no evidence that she's not.
84-year-old Nancy Guthrie still missing this morning as the search enters week 4. Our own investigators weigh in on the latest developments. Plus, we are learning more about the accused high school shooter Colt Gray's troubled home life. His mom, Marcee, expected to take the stand next hour.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Kouri, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Having reference Nancy, a white female, 84 years of age, 5'2" medium build, Pineapple Blue, ring after 2,200 hours as of yesterday. Nancy has high blood pressure, pacemaker, and cardiac issues.
It's been nearly 3 weeks since that call alerting police that Nancy Guthrie was missing, and her disappearance remains trending at this hour. The search for Nancy Guthrie enters its 4th week, but still no signs of the 84-year-old. Nancy's children, including Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie, remain hopeful with several social media posts like this one.
I just wanted to come on and say that we still have hope, and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late. And you're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing. And we are here. We believe. And we believe in the essential goodness of every human being. And it's never too late.
According to several reports, a volunteer search group recovered a backpack near Nancy Guthrie's home in Tucson, which has since been turned over to police. Investigators are still looking at all evidence in the case, but still no updates, no suspects, And again, no one knows where Nancy Guthrie is. So what are the next steps in the search for missing Nancy Guthrie? Are police now in recovery mode? I know a lot of you at home are asking that. Here to discuss, we have retired NYPD detectives Tom Smith and Mike Alcazar. Mike, let's start with you. I mean, now we're hearing possible backpack found. There were reports that the FBI was working with local retailers, including Walmart in the area. Could this be the clue?
I mean, the backpack could have belonged to somebody that's undomiciled. There's a lot of homeless population there in the desert. So I would hope that that backpack wasn't there when law enforcement was actually conducting searches in the desert. The Walmart stores is, you know, a good lead. They've identified the backpack. They're trying to identify, I guess, any kind of surveillance where the purchases were made. They can track it back to a credit card purchase. They're visiting gun stores, right, asking for certain individuals that might have purchased the holster or the gun. So this is good steps that the Pima County and the FBI are doing. So the investigation, I think, is still ongoing and well on its way.
Tom, at what point do we say that this is a recovery or a cold case?
Yeah, that's a great question. And at some point, unfortunately, someone's going to have to make that call. I don't know when or who that's going to be, but at some point, it is going to have that determination. But for now, it's not that, right? Like Mike said, now you're still leading with the viable leads that are coming in, the tips that are coming in, the gathering of evidence. This backpack, who knows? Listen, I always said, there is no such thing as a perfect crime. They made a mistake somewhere, and it's just a matter of someone finding that mistake that leads, you know, to a positive outcome with this.
Well, what does a scaled back operation look like, Tom? And if that happens, there were some reports over the weekend that it was already in discussion or happening.
Yeah, it's mostly probably going to come from the FBI because the FBI can't let out 100 agents, you know, 24/7 to deal with one crime. Yeah, and I think that's where you're mostly going to see the scale back when it comes to them. They are still going to be involved as a source of a resource when it comes to this investigation. But as far as on the ground, 24/7, that is probably where you're going to see the most drawback. Pima County is still going to be on it, but you're going to start to see, you know, the manpower be cut a little bit, and then just really deal with the leads that are coming in and having officers and detectives follow those leads up.
And Mike, you know, I still think that, you know, we have seen in recent years with Koberger, Hewerman, D'Angelo, it was DNA that helped crack the case. But now we're hearing that there was a holdup in this case, that there was foreign DNA. And by that, I mean no one known to Nancy and not Nancy's DNA in the home that was collected. But there's a problem with it. It's mixed with her DNA, and it could take up to a year for us to get a possible match.
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal when you collect DNA that it might have a mixture. So it's up to the investigators to identify the profiles, the elimination profiles, people that had access to the home, potentially investigators there, potentially other suspects that might have touched, you know, surfaces that caused this mixture. But I think the problem is going to be that maybe the sheriff is going to come under fire, perhaps for utilizing that Florida lab instead of the FBI lab. So, you know, time will tell if they be able to yield a DNA profile that can hopefully identify the suspect. And if it takes a year, I think that the sheriff might take some heat for that.
What questions do you still have, Mike? Because, I mean, I really thought that we were going to have possibly more rundown of a lead, maybe a suspect by now or a person of interest after the video that we thought was unrecoverable was found.
Yeah, usually when you have a video like that, of course it's very difficult because this is a mass suspect, but we rely heavily on the public. I'm sure they're getting thousands and thousands of tips. It's just the job of the investigators to comb through all that information and hopefully identify a tip that develops into a lead. I think it is a little bit troubling that we haven't had more viable tips, so that's a little bit concerning to me.
Tom, what questions do you have?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. You know, we still don't know everything the investigators know. That's the other part of this. We probably know about 10% of what they know. And I've been there, and I'm sure Mike has been there with understanding that everything can't be let out to the public because of the sensitivity of it. So we still don't know any viable leads that they have that they're running down, any phone calls, any possible other aspects of this that are out there. So again, it's all a matter of what's out there to the public, and needing the public's help is key. That's where, someone knows who this guy is. Someone knows him or recognizes him, and it's a matter of that person stepping forward and giving that tip line a call or the authorities a call.
1-800-CALL-FBI. There's more than $100,000 on the line for someone that gives that tip, and someone knows something. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your service and also for being on the program. Coming up next on Opening Statements.
At some point during that conversation, does he ask you a question that disturbs you?
Yes.
And what was that question?
If I do something terrible, would you still love me? I think that's the way it was worded.
Okay.
The jury got to hear from that woman, Colt Gray's grandmother, last week. And now, in about 30 minutes, dear old mom, Marcee Gray, expected to take the stand. Plus, Dale Warner is accused of killing his once missing wife, Dee, and hiding her body in a sealed tank on his property. So we are asking, will testimony from his employees tip the scales of justice? Welcome back to Opening Statements. I'm Matt Johnson, in today for Julie Grant. Spotlight now on the state of Georgia for the murder trial of Colin Gray, the father of the accused Appalachia High School shooter. This morning, the defendant's estranged wife, Marcee Gray, is expected to take the stand. On Friday, the jury heard from Colt's grandmother, who spoke about his troubled upbringing.
This is one of my overalls of the doorway of Colin's room.
And did he appear to also share that with his youngest son, Kouri?
It appeared that way, yes. Another overall of that same bedroom as I'm making my way around the room. This is an overall of a pair of swim goggles that I located in that bedroom. And inside the goggles, you can see what was identified as one bore sight and one rifle cartridge.
And it's kind of hard to see in this picture, and we'll see clearer, but what are those boxes that we're seeing?
Various ammunition boxes.
Okay.
These were overalls of some firearms that were located in that closet after I removed the clothing that was covering them.
Okay. Were there two firearms up there?
Yes, there were.
Okay.
This is a overall photograph of a box of handgun ammunition that was in the top of the closet.
I do want to ask you, those firearms at the top of the closet, what were those two firearms?
One of them was a shotgun and the other was a rifle.
Tell us what we're looking at here and from where.
This is one of my overalls of Colt's room. In this perspective, I'm standing in the doorway and I'm facing generally the west wall.
So this is 145.96. Tell us what we see here.
This is an overall photograph of the west wall. You can partially see the desk, and you can also see some things affixed to the wall. This is a close-up of some of the photographs that were lower down on the wall and difficult to see from farther away. This is an overall of a black and colored rifle sling and a tan soft rifle case that were located in that closet. They were both folded over the bar that's used to hang clothing from. This is a photograph of the rifle case after I opened it, just to show that there was nothing inside of it. You can see the same desk that we discussed earlier, as well as a series of photographs and articles that were affixed to his wall.
Are all the photos in this all of the same person?
They appear to be, yes.
And are all the news articles here related to that same person?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, I'm looking at a photo kind of down on the bottom right corner, and you can see it in the photo in front of you as well. That tactical vest that this individual's wearing, is that a similar vest to the one that you recovered from the laundry room?
Yes, ma'am. Obviously, the color is different, but the style is generally the same.
And who is this individual?
This individual is Nicholas Cruz.
And what is the significance of Nicholas Cruz?
Nicholas Cruz perpetrated a mass shooting event at Parkland High School in Florida on February 14th of 2018. During that incident, there were 17 people killed, including teachers and students.
After Marcee has duct taped you and stole your car, stole your money, and she's in jail. Okay. Do you go visit the kids in Winder with Colin around Christmas time?
I went the day after Christmas, I think.
Who stayed in Father's room?
He and little Coley.
Okay, so Colin Gray and little Coley both stayed in that room. Okay. Did Colt talk to you about a Christmas present he had gotten?
Sure.
Okay, and what was that Christmas present?
It was a gun.
Okay, and was it a rifle?
Yes.
Who did you get the Christmas present from?
From his dad.
Where was the gun kept at that time?
I honestly don't know. He came out into the living area with it and went back down the hall, but I didn't follow him, so I don't know if it was in his room or in Coley's room at that time.
You were the next witness, and you weren't here when they were ready to call you.
Yes, sir.
So there's been something. So we sent the jury home and bring them back Monday morning. You would be the first witness Monday morning.
Yes, sir.
There's some concern about you appearing. You don't want to be held in contempt for not coming. You don't want deputies to be sent out to find you.
Oh, no.
You don't want to be put in jail for contempt.
I'll be here on Sunday.
All right.
And the alleged mass shooter, Mommy Dearest, expected to take the stand in about an hour or less. Here to discuss, we have our guests for this hour, former prosecutor Tommy Pope and criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci. Tommy, what do you expect from dear old Mom?
I think Mom's going to be a train wreck. I think the things you've heard she's done before, I was sitting as we were listening to it, you almost see how Colt ended up this way. This almost be some type of mitigation for his trial with the way his parents are conducting themselves. And it seemed like the only person that really cared about him was Grandma. And so I think there'll be, the state will do what they can to get out what they need. But, she does have the call to the school that day, which I'll give her credit for that. But I think she's going to have some credibility issues that the defense, this may be Mario's day today, because I think the cross-examination will be probably as effective or more effective than the direct will be today.
Mario, what do you expect? And why isn't Mom charged here? Does she have some sort of immunity that we don't know about?
Well, I don't think she has immunity, but she didn't live with Colin. If you remember, she lost custody of Colin. She only had custody of the two minor children because she, at one point, I believe she was charged with damaging his car and threatening to kill him. And Tommy's right. She is going to be a train wreck. She comes in with so much baggage. This is something as a defense attorney you would look forward to. So, she's got a prior arrest history. She's on probation. She's abused her mother. She's had prior DWI. She's had prior check cashing problems. She's had prior drug problems. She's been charged in 2 separate counties. So she comes in. I wouldn't even know where to start. This could be, do you start with a criminal record? Do you start with the fact that she had no custody of the children? She's a train wreck, this woman, just like Tommy said. It's going to be a lot of fun today.
Mario, I think that you're right. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to watch that cross-examination play out. But speaking of the defense, I kind of feel like this might be the last witness for the state. Might be. So how are you preparing your defense if you're on this defendant's team? Are we looking at this defendant taking the stand? He almost needs to. He really needs to explain himself. Why didn't you see the shrine to the devil child of Parkland? I mean, come on.
If you're coming to me, I'm going to spin this as an unforeseeable tragedy and not criminal negligence. The child hid his telephone conversations from his father, his text messages. He kept notes that he kept from his father. Grandma kept information from the father. So look, it's horrible, but this is an unforeseeable tragedy. If I was the defense, that's the spin I'm putting on this. This is not negligence. I couldn't see this coming. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. So that's what I'm going to spin this as, an unforeseeable tragedy.
And I wonder if Mommy Dearest Marcee is going to be asked about medicine being given to the alleged school shooter. Let's listen to it first before we react.
Did you give him anything for Colt when you went to the
Marcee gave him some medicine.
What kind of medicine?
Zoloft.
Make sure Mom leaves my Zoloft. And then he tells you, if you don't leave it, things will turn really bad really quickly. And then he's asking, where is my Zoloft? And then he responds back, where the is my Zoloft?
Yes.
And then he says, I will literally die without it.
Yes.
Is that what you want?
Yes.
And then he's quickly, this is a series of texts all right in a row. You just ruined my life. Hope you're happy. Why would y'all lie and say I threatened to kill y'all?
Tommy, do we ask Mom about that on the stand and get it out of the way? And how do you frame it?
I think you've got to come to the prosecution, much like the defense cross would be, that this, we keep using the word train wreck, but it is a horrible domestic situation wrapped in mental illness, wrapped in, whether inherited from Mom, I don't know Dad's circumstance in that regard, but you got to lay it out. And why did you do it? Because we were so frustrated. I mean, if you throw in say the mental health department failed him somehow, or the social workers failed him somehow, any little bit would help to show that, she was trying to, it's the old self-medication thing, that she was trying to help level him out to keep it. But it seems like he wouldn't need Mom to give it. With his conduct, seemed like he would have the prescription himself. It'd just be a matter of, did you fill my prescription? So, like I said, going from what Mario said, this whole circumstance, if I was defending Dad, I'd say, we're trying the best we can. They don't give you a manual for being a parent when anybody's a parent, and much less with all these insane circumstances with the mother and otherwise. And I was just trying to raise the kid to maturity the best I could.
It's just a tragic situation all around, and it kind of makes sense why this was a change of venue. Gentlemen, we do have to hit a break, so we have to end the discussion there. I could talk about this case all day. Coming up next on Opening Statements, will employees of defendant Dale Warner tip the scales of justice? We take a closer look at some key testimony.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Kouri, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Court is dark today in the murder trial for Dale Warner, but court resumes back in session tomorrow. He's accused of killing his wife, Dee, who was last seen in April 2021. Her remains were found 3 years later, sealed in a metal tank on their property. On Friday, former employees of Dee and Dale Warner described what they saw the day the wife went missing.
Were you working on April 25th, 21 at the Munger farm?
I was working on a personal vehicle of mine.
Okay, so were you supposed to show up for work that day?
I was not.
What did you have to work on your truck?
I believe I was doing radiator hoses.
Did anybody go with you?
My little brother came to help me.
How old was your little brother?
He's, 4 years younger than me. So at the time, he would have been about 20.
When you got to the farm, do you recall approximately what time it was?
Mid to late morning, I believe.
Did you see anybody else on the farm when you got there?
I don't remember seeing anyone right away. I don't remember how long it was, but the first person that I remember seeing was Dale.
Do you remember approximately what time that was?
Maybe 10, 11 o'clock, somewhere in there.
Did you notice anything different about Mr. Warner at this time?
Yes.
And what's that?
He's not wearing a hat.
Why is that different to you?
Because we all wore hats. I count on one hand the times I've seen Dale out of the house without a hat.
Sunday, April 25th, 2021. You said you got there in the morning. I know we're going back a number of years, so roughly maybe 10 a.m., 11 a.m.?
Somewhere in there,
Somewhere.
yes.
And you came, did your brother come with you?
No, he drove separately.
He drove separately. Now, at some point, Mr. Warner comes out and chats with you, correct?
Yes.
And he lets you know that Ms. Warner is missing.
Yes.
And he also says that he was concerned that she was missing, correct?
That is correct.
You, excuse me, when you were on the property, you just went on the property. You didn't like go and tell him, hi, I'm here or anything like that, correct?
No.
You just went to work on your truck.
That's correct.
And he didn't know your brother was coming either, correct?
I don't believe so, no.
That day, is it fair to say that everyone was in and out of there all the time?
Yes.
Do you dispute that you went down to the load barn and chatted with him?
No.
And that you assisted him with putting trash in the bucket of the JCB?
I wouldn't have I can't find the word for that. But I wouldn't contest that, no.
Right, and so I think you know, I've got the interview that you gave to the police, and so you're not contesting that that's you on the interview saying that, correct?
No.
Thank you. And again, if you want to listen to it, you certainly can. And then on that day, the entire day you were there, you don't remember seeing Mr. Warner with a tank at all, correct?
I do not, no.
And you don't remember seeing Mr. Warner doing anything with the tank, correct?
I do not.
On that day, April 25th, 2021, that Sunday, you did not see anything out of the ordinary on the Munger property, correct?
No.
Correct. Yes, sir?
Yes, that's correct. I did not see anything out of the ordinary. To be fair, I wasn't looking for anything out of the ordinary. It was just another day.
Were the tanks always full, or were they sometimes empty, or how did that work? On the farm, I mean.
Usually, if I'm working on them, they're usually empty.
Okay. Now, if one of these field anhydrous tanks had a hole in it in the tank itself, would that tank be any good?
No, because it'll be leaking all the anhydrous out.
Okay, because you're trying to put pressure into it, right? Because you got that gauge. Is that correct?
Yes.
And and then the hole would be doing what?
It'd be leaking anhydrous out.
Okay. And if you had a tank like that had a hole in it, what would you do with it?
I'd put it out of service.
In your role as the mechanic, you interacted with Miss Warner as well as Mr. Warner, correct?
Correct.
When you were working with Miss Warner, is it accurate to say there were good days with her and bad days with her?
That would be correct.
Miss Warner, it's fair to say, would yell at you during those bad days. She would scream and yell.
Yes.
And when you worked with Mr. Warner in your role, was he pretty easy to get along with?
Yes.
On April 24th, 2021, so that's a Saturday, you worked on the farm until about 7 p.m. Is that
Correct.
accurate? Yes?
Yes.
Sorry, I spoke over you. And you had actually spoken to Miss Warner at 6:30 p.m. that night?
Correct.
And everything seemed normal with her?
Correct.
I have no further questions.
So what do you think? Will testimony from the former employees tip the scales of justice in this case? Here to discuss, attorney and former prosecutor Tommy Pope and criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci. Tommy, what do you think? Did any of that testimony tip the scales for you?
I think it dialed it in. I was able to watch most of that last week, and I think it helped, but I don't know that you're there to smoke and gun yet. But it's, it brings it in. I thought it was sometimes almost a little tedious. I thought particularly that first witness, I thought he did a very good job, because I was thinking if if this guy's your boss or your friend you weren't, it'd have to be difficult talking about it, but they were basically just given the facts as they went through. And so I think it was effective as a building block. I don't know that it totally carries the day.
Mario, your thoughts on that? Did it tip the scales either way?
I kind of agree with Tommy on this. I think it's pretty level field right now. I think they're trying to show that, everything was pretty normal. It didn't seem like there was anything out of the ordinary on this day. Everybody was acting like they would normally behave. So, there was no drama. I don't see it, like Tommy just said, it's a building block. I think that there's a lot more to come over the next few days.
Yeah, I think it's a tee-up. I think it's a building block. Any analogy that you want to use there. Tommy, any significance to the hat? Are we going to hear more about that? I thought that was interesting.
I thought the same thing. I wondered when we saw it, that it was unusual. I don't know, we're going to see a hat inside where she was dumped. I don't know, but it was clear enough that they wanted to point that out, because there didn't seem to be a lot of dispute, on the video of the workers being able to identify who that was, either whether it was by the ATV vehicle he was driving or seeing him, or, so the hat thing, I guess for your viewers, stay tuned. I think the hat will turn up again.
The hat that holds the key. Mario, this also has that element of a feel of a cold case turned court case. Does that help the defense?
Yeah, that always helps the defense. The colder the case gets, the more people forget things. We heard from the medical examiner. I believe in the case, the medical examiner really couldn't tie down an exact time of the death, when it happened. So those things are really important. So whenever you have a cold case, you're gonna have evidence like that goes in the favor of the defense. You also have witnesses who forget things. It's over so many years. You can't always remember what happened on a particular day. So I think that always goes to the defense.
And speaking of the defense, my favorite question to ask any defendant usually when I'm chasing them down at the courthouse, are you going to testify? Mario, do you think that he's going to take the stand?
I don't know in this case. It's always a tough decision, and as you know, it's their decision. I have many cases where my client wants to testify, and I do all my best to tell them not to. But I've won more cases where the defendant actually does testify than I've lost. In a typical murder case, the jury, although the judge is telling them you can't hold it against them, they want to hear from him or her. So, a defendant testifying is a big deal. And like I said, I've won more cases where they do testify than I've lost.
Yeah, I haven't heard too much, Tommy, in this case that it might hurt this defendant in a cross-examination. I actually think it might be helpful for this jury to hear, I love my wife, I had nothing, I helped in the search or whatnot. Your thoughts?
Ironically, mentioning to what Mario said, sometimes you think if that guy's going to be credible, he can shut up. Not that the jury, Mario, would ever use it against him, you understand. But I think the nature of how the body was sealed in the container has really narrowed it down. Honestly, between the workers, you got to have the skill to cut it. You got to have the skill to weld it back. It's basically, in my mind at least, down to the circle of workers and the husband. And so I think they're going to expect to hear from him because they heard from the workers.
All right, Tommy Pope, Mario Gallucci, thank you so much for being with us. That's going to do it for opening statements on this Monday.